All right, welcome everyone. This is our 20th episode of the Spiky Signal Show, where I sit down with some of the most exceptional revenue leaders in the revenue space. This podcast is meant for all of us to explore the biggest problems facing customer facing teams, share the real challenges of sales, what revenue leaders deal with on an everyday basis, whether it's pipeline visibility to coaching, deal velocity. We do it all here on the podcast. I'm your host, Wally Charani, head of revenue at Spiky.ai, and today I'm here with Noah Wittman, CRO at Crumware. And today we're talking about what it's like to build revenue inside an engineering-led company. This topic is actually really interesting to me, and it's such a unique perspective to have on an episode. Usually, the people that come onto this episode are a CRO that's coming into a already established revenue team. So it's very cool to see this type of experience here, Noah. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, and excited to tell my story.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you just give like a quick elevator pitch on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Noah Wittman. As you said, I'm the CRO at Crumware and been at Crumware about a year and a half. Prior to that, I have built my career in tech sales and a lot of years as an individual contributor at a handful of different, size and stage tech companies, and also been a founder a couple of times. So most recently, prior to joining Crumware, I was founder and CEO of a company called Privium that I ran for a few years, and we went through Techstars in Austin and did a lot of really cool things, but ultimately ran out of money, and it was the typical startup story of okay, we took it as far as we could go, and had to wind it down and face the music. So in that journey, I met Colin Griffin, the founder and CEO of Crumware, and that was through the Techstars cohort that I was a part of, and he became an advisor for us. So I worked with Colin in that capacity for maybe a year or so, a little less than a year, and we got to know each other a little bit and worked together, even though it was only a couple hours a week with an advisor, but still got a sense of how we worked and things like that. And so when I was trying to figure out what was next for me when we're winding down Privium, I was reaching out to people, trying to see what's out there, etc. And I asked Colin, hey, do you know anyone that could use some help with sales? Just kind of open ended, and he said, yeah, I need help. And so that's how it happened, and I wasn't brought in as a CRO. I mean, there wasn't a job posting. There wasn't it was just he knew he needed help. They needed help, and then we had to kind of figure out what that role looked like.
No, that's super interesting. Were you guys were the companies in the same space or were they different industries?
Different, yeah. So Privium's uh, a SaaS product, SaaS company, and the meta level of that is we were SaaS intelligence. So we built a product that gave insights across an enterprise in terms of all the software tools being used from a cost perspective. Where are we wasting money because we have overlapping tools or unused licenses and things like that. So we were in that space, and Crumware is not. So I would say not overlapping at all. But the thing that bridges that gap is we did not have a CTO or a technical founder at Privium, and I could have a whole episode on that journey. But Colin was an advisor for us and kind of filling some of that technical capacity because he's a software engineer by trade and built Crumware, with a really technical focus. So that was the bridge. There was he really saw the value in what we were building at Privium and understood the need for that type of tool in his work, and so that's why he was interested in being an advisor for us. And then so I think the fit is really the the career kind of experience and lens on things, So he's the CEO, but he's also the CTO of Crumware, in a lot of ways, and so he leads in a very kind of technical way. So it's been I think you'd have to ask him, but I think very complimentary, to have someone come in that has that go to market experience.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense and super interesting. I mean, if he's an engineer, by trade, then it makes sense in terms of like the company they built and more
Exactly.
engineering focused. So, when he brought you on board as kind of like, I guess, the first revenue or go-to-market hire, what did that look like? Like joining a company that was engineering led first.
Yeah, it definitely not something I had experience with, and so the the first part of that was trying to identify like where are the biggest needs, in both directions. I think from Crumware and Colin's perspective of trying to understand, it's that classic you don't know what you don't know, right? So he didn't fully know where he needed the most help on the go-to-market side of things, and you know, it's such a unique thing coming in and going, okay, I can see there's a lot of areas of opportunity, and but kind of leaning on him to say, you gotta, tell me where you need me most, because we got to pick something and get started, because it was clear, the the accumulation of things over time, right? It would be, there's a couple of aspects to it. It's one thing to be joining a engineer led company, but one that at that point had been in business over 8 years. That's another kind of compounding element to it. So just when you think about like, where's all the documentation, like how do who are our customers, what do we do for there was no CRM, right? So just as an example, they were using Jira as a kind of hacked together CRM. And so, there's things like that where I kind of needed some direction of, do you want me to start kind of from the sales operations side of thing and like, cleaning things up, getting some ordering process? Do you want me to, start, prospecting? Do you want, where do you want me to start? So that was it initially. And interestingly enough, we started in more of a product management kind of capacity, because Crumware had just recently, at that time, had just recently taken over as the official maintainer of an open source tool called Opinio, and hadn't really done much to implement a strategy around it. And so he was like, all right, we're excited about this Opinio thing. We think there's a huge opportunity there. Can you kind of dig in on that and help us figure out how to monetize it and things? So we started there, and over time that, it just continued to grow. And I always saw the opportunity as, what it's become, which is CRO, and because there was just a huge void there, and I knew I could fill it and do a good job at it. But I also, didn't want to go and say, oh, I need this C-level title and blah, blah, blah. I was just like, where do you need help? And then, after a few months, we started saying head of sales. And then, after a year or so, I kind of just brought it up and said, hey, I think it's time to get the title of the job I'm doing. And, everybody was on board with that.
Yeah. I guess like where were you starting? Establishing the first kind of go to market and like the processes around there. How were you earning the trust of like a more of an engineering team? Did you have to kind of like get on their level, understand what's going on, and then communicate in their language? Like, how did that kind of go?
Yeah, I would say it's ongoing. That there's some ratio, right, of number of years of being in business, and how long it takes to kind of implement things, right? So 8.5 years before me, and 1.5 years since. So definitely ongoing. The some of the things like I mentioned, just saying, hey, we've got to get a CRM. I can't use Jira as the CRM. Like it just looking like when he first showed me like, here's our opportunities. I was just like, no, I can't. Like it just,
Yeah.
I can't do it. So, there's little things like that. It's just like, all right, I'm not asking for a full suite of tools, but I at least need a CRM, right? So starting there, and then, some of the most challenging things, at least initially, was just unpacking all of the things we do, because Crumware started as a purely a custom software development shop, and evolved over time to, we still do that, but also evolved to having this platform engineering practice that combines, it's kind of a blend of consulting and hands-on engineering, and support, engineer to engineer, developer to developer support, and things like that. And so we're a services company at the core, but Colin had recognized, and it was high priority for me, to how do we make these things more productized and more repeatable? Because if it was just purely, hey, we do custom software, I wouldn't have been able to help. It's like I don't know how to go out and differentiate, and have any sort of like go to market motion to do everything one off. And so initially, I made sure he was kind of the same mindset and knew that they needed to start doing some of that. So that was part of it. It's like, okay, what do we do? What do we do well? It's not easy to stay in business 8 years. So clearly we're doing something well. And figuring out what those things were, and then, narrowing focus and saying, okay, we can do whatever, 10, 12, 15 different kind of flavors of this, but realistically for a small company, we've got to pick a subset of that to focus on and put resources behind. And so, that's still somewhat of a work in progress, but we've got kind of the pillars now, I think, that we're seeing success with.
That's awesome. Did you purposely ignore anything in the very beginning? Like, hey, right now is not the time to focus on outbound, for example, or anything like that. We need to focus on kind of like
Yeah.
the foundation with the CRM, for example. What did you purposely ignore until, later on?
Yeah, it's a good question. There, since you brought up outbound, and there were some things, and outbound's one of them, that I didn't know the answer. So I'm of the thinking of, if I don't know, well, let's try it. It's not overcommit, but if we don't experiment and try a few things, then just having some blanket opinion or philosophy of, no, we don't do that, or we don't, we're not starting there. So we tried some outbound things, experimented with things that I've known to work well, in past experience and things like that. And the key for me was, well, I guess a couple of things. One, making sure we're measuring what we're doing, because otherwise, just it's the old spray and pray is the saying that always sticks with me. Just trying a bunch of things and having no idea like how to evaluate the data and say, okay, we tried this, we saw success or not, and how do we know? So just making sure we could measure that stuff was really important. And then also being aware and mindful of when to pull the plug on things, and not just continuing to bang our head against the wall and go, oh, if we just send 1,000 more emails, like this next 1,000 is going to be the secret, right? It's like, so with that as an example, we've tried different outbound things. We haven't found anything that works really well yet, so that's one where we've tried some things. When it's not working and we can tell through data, pull the plug, let's focus that energy somewhere else. In terms of other things that kind of kick the can on, the thing for me as now as CRO, but even a year ago when I didn't have the title, is I'm not a marketer. Like my experience, my skills are in the sales sales domain, within that revenue umbrella. And I know enough about the marketing pieces and the types of things that we need and that we needed at that time. But it's not my experience. Not to mention you can't be everyone and do everything all the time, right? So that was a gap where I initially said, hey, I can own most of the sales parts and wear a lot wear all the hats from a sales perspective, but can I get a little budget for some marketing help? Because I could really use someone that, just advisor, consultant kind of part, and there just wasn't budget for it. So that's one that I was forced to, put off. So it was like, nope, there's no budget for that. So figure it out. You're the marketing guy. And so, I did. And for me, something that we've put off is, really it's hiring, on the sales side of things, because it's tempting and I think, easy. I say easy with air quotes because it's not easy if you don't have the budget, but it's easy to come in and just say, oh, I know, let's hire an AE and a BDR and let's like stand this up and let's just put them out. But reality is the more work I've done to kind of unpack what we do well and what's working, the more I realize we're not ready. Like it would be a waste of resource to put salary into that because we just don't have enough structure and pieces in place for them to be successful. And so that's one that I would love to have the help, but the reality is just hiring people and not setting them up for success is you're just going to spin your wheels.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, what were you doing in terms of being kind of like the only first revenue go to market hire
Yeah.
in terms of like generating that top of the funnel? Was it just more of a like networking relationship type of thing? Were you leveraging any third party, like, outsourcing basically like SDRs? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so we did have one other sales person, kind of SDR, when I started. So, it's not that Crumware had never, hired anyone or done anything. It was just there had never really been a strategy behind it. So I did have a peer when I started, and we were, trying some of the outbound motions and things like that, and just not seeing success with it. The two big ways that Crumware has and continues to get opportunities and revenue for that matter are word of mouth and referrals. And back to there must be something we're doing well to stay in business that long, right? So we do really, really high quality premium work. Everyone is US based, right? So that itself is a differentiator with other kind of dev shops that have people all over the world. And of course, there's an advantage to having people elsewhere. It's not that we're against that, but we have seen that there are certain industries that need people to be US based due to regulation and just kind of background checks and things that go with it. So so there has been a lot of just through doing good work, a good pipeline of referral and word of mouth. And the other side is partners. So we have a good number of technology partners that each one looks a little bit different in terms of, is it more of a pure channel resale partner in relationship, or more of a we do the services when they bring us into things. So we have a good channel pipeline, and our primary partner just in a lot of ways is SUSE. And a lot of people in the US and North America for that matter haven't heard of SUSE, and I hadn't either. I mean, I had heard the name, but I couldn't have told you one thing about them. And for anyone listening that is in that boat, it's SUSE, which is part of the challenge too. Isn't said like you don't say it like it's spelled. But they're a German-based company, huge in Europe and really huge in North America as well in terms of what they do and the fundamental, like where is SUSE? They're everywhere, but just for whatever reason haven't done a great job historically of getting that name recognition out there in the U.S. But they're you can think of them as a Red Hat competitor. They directly compete on the Linux support, commercial support for Linux distributions, and then the area that we really specialize in and do a lot of our work with SUSE on, though, is on the cloud native Kubernetes and container side of things, and they have a product called Rancher that really is kind of the centerpiece of our practice. And so our team being experts on their tech stack, we do a lot of work with SUSE.
Awesome. No, that's really cool. Yeah, no, it's really interesting to see that perspective because when you first join that type of company, you're just like, okay, where do I start? But it always starts with kind of the foundation, right? Setting up the right CRM or processes in place to actually have top of funnel and the sales cycle work optimally, right? Because if those things are
Yep.
not set up in place, they just break. So, yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense there. I know we're coming up on time, so kind of the last question I wanted to ask you here was,
Yeah.
like, what's the biggest opportunity that these types of companies leave on the table without go to market? Like, is it more optimizing their sales cycles? Is it lead generation? What are they missing that they could, have if they had a go to market?
Yeah, it's a great question. Within Crumware, I can say confidently that there was definitely a leaky bucket problem, and not having the people in place to focus on the sales cycle and all of the things that go into opportunity management and keeping the deals moving along. And you know Colin, the CEO, was doing most of that along with everything else, right? And so
Yeah.
it was just clear to me as someone with the experience and the outside perspective that so many things were just getting lost in the mix and forgotten or follow-ups missed or just too many opportunities to possibly manage. And so I say leaky bucket because that metaphor of like, hey, if you're in terms of pipeline, right? If you say we need more leads, we need more leads, we need more opportunities, and then you're actually not converting or being efficient with the ones you have, then it's not really a top of funnel thing necessarily, right? So to me, it to answer your question, I would imagine this happens elsewhere, but it's like, okay, sure, everyone wants more pipeline, everyone wants more opportunities, but if and like you were alluding to, by jumping straight into that and not getting some kind of the fundamentals shored up so that we actually know how to track opportunities and make sure that when we do get them, we can convert them at an acceptable, rate and things like that. And then now let's get to the top of funnel now that we kind of know the pieces are in place. So I think there's a lot of that. And then the other thing I would say, just kind of anecdotally looking at professional services and custom dev shop kind of businesses, is there's typically a lack of differentiation and just I can't tell you as a founder, and I think probably primarily through that, the number of LinkedIn messages and emails from dev shops all over the world, it's just nonstop. It's every day. And I mean, there's tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of these kinds of companies, ranging in size and, expertise and specialization and all that. But it's just noise because it's like, it all sounds the same. It's like, oh, we have a team of blah, blah, blah. We have a team of, and it's like, okay, why in the world would I, respond to this? There's nothing that stands out. So I think that's probably, the things that I would focus on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great. Well, one last question. Usually I ask this to every person that comes on the episode.
Sure.
For the next episode, who do you know that would be a great revenue leader to bring on here? And if you don't have anyone top of mind, no worries. You can always email me, but figured that we can add a
Yeah.
name to here so that the viewers can, reference them as well.
Yeah, it's smart. That's the old Cutco strategy. Do you know Cutco, the knife company?
No, no,
Uh,
no.
they I did it for maybe a month way back in the day, but they had this model that was just, it worked like clockwork. You'd go into the home and do a knife demonstration, and they're really, legit high quality knives. And at the end, you're like, and who else do you know that I can go do this demonstration to? It's really effective, right? So, yeah, I'll say Nick Doyle. He was VP of sales at Redis and Cockroach Labs, and he recently joined a startup. Who knows if he'd be a podcast guy, but he's definitely someone I've looked up to and learned a lot from as a mentor.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'll reach out to him then. Well,
Yep.
amazing. Thanks so much for being on this episode with me, Noah. I learned a lot. Hopefully the viewers have. And yeah, really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you.